Let's start instead. So, what the fuck is this shit? Mathematics education. It is difficult, like that is why I have that image. I think it's a bit complicated. Let's start. So, I start with a few seconds of life in school for one single pupil. So this is just one person for some seconds. I'm trying to see what she is doing without its intended meaning. So then you see it as conventionally established, as a convention, and then it's supervised, it's a special setting and special schedule, etc. So the point is that it sort of fits with the ritual form, with Rappaport's definition of the ritual form. This is a kind of quite typical mathematics education puzzle. So the point here is that this is the text that you read sitting in a classroom. So this is a puzzle because there's a right answer. And I've chosen this metaphor of a puzzle, thinking about Thomas Kuhn and his book The Structure of Scientific Revolutions from 62, because he had some quite specific ideas of what puzzle solving is, and he tried to make a point in relation to science with this metaphor of puzzle solving. So I want to make a similar point with education. So a puzzle is something where you know that there is an answer, and you know pretty much what the answer looks like. You have this box with the puzzle, and you see the image on the outside, so you know that this is what you want to get. Like that, for example. This answer is kind of not like going to the moon or something like that's impossible. It's something that you should be able to do, and this fits with what pupils get in school. And you know what methods to use, because pupils know that they are going to use not only mathematics but often like a certain type of mathematics. Like you know that it's division or it's addition or whatever, algebra. And then what counts as a good answer is established by convention. So this was provocative when Thomas Kuhn introduced these ideas in theory of science, because before him another philosopher, Karl Popper, said that scientists do problem solving and always try to come up with what he called bold conjectures, where they are supposedly very creative and kind of try to take very, very long steps to further our knowledge. But Kuhn says that is not what actually takes place normally in science. What scientists do is puzzle solving. And there are some features with like this form of activity have some consequences. Firstly, that you can become fascinated. You could think that these limitations of the activity would make it boring, but the opposite is actually more true. Like if you have these very, very complex, open-ended, difficult problems, then you can become difficult to know what to do even. But if you have a puzzle, you know what to do, you know that you should be able to get an answer, and then you can kind of solve one puzzle, and then you go on to the next puzzle, and you can even become addicted. And Thomas Kuhn, it's rewarding. Exactly. It's rewarding because you can get the solution, and then you go on to the next one, and you know that you should, if you just work hard, you should be able to get the solution. And Kuhn said this about scientists, that is why scientists can become so fascinated by science, because they have this small problem that is sort of disconnected from everything else, and they can really focus on that. So he said that scientists are, like normal scientists are, what we in Swedish call fackidioter. And that is what's typical for science. And that is quite different from what Popper said, that scientists are this open-minded, creative creatures. So this was very provocative when Kuhn said this in 1962. See, the use of creativity, like there is some use of creativity, but it's very restricted by the form of the puzzle. And puzzle solving demands subscription to and contributes to the reproduction of the worldview of the paradigm. So paradigm is another word that Kuhn uses. And it calls it like a worldview. Like that the paradigm, this worldview, says what is a puzzle. It says what the answers are. It gives you the methods and things like that. And by solving these puzzles, you sort of contribute to the reproduction of this paradigm. And in a similar way as science has paradigms, I think you could say that mathematics education constitutes a paradigm that pupils work within. Mathematics education gives the puzzle and says what methods to use and says what's a good answer. And this is then very different from the idea that these puzzles sort of emerge from nature by itself, so that sort of pupils interact with nature. That might be a fantasy that you have, like that you work with realistic problems, but in fact, like from this anthropological perspective, it's very clear that these puzzles are constructed, and the methods are conventional, and what counts as a proper and good answer is also established by convention. So again, like this comparison, for instance, this is something that's done in school with this optimal response, etc. So we go on. So this is not how classroom activity is usually interpreted. Like this detailed practical level, it's not kind of articulated or made explicit. You don't want to think about school as a convention in this way. You think of it as problem solving, as work on problems, because that is how you learn. So this is kind of the interpretation of natives. So you have another say level of meaning, because this what I just said, that creates meaning too, like, but that's the anthropological meaning. Like this is the meaning of modernity. So here you can call that the enacted meaning, following Roy Rappaport. And according to this meaning, life is problem solving. Life is filled with problems that can only be solved with mathematical knowledge. So in this problem that we had, like the pizza problem, it was as if this work in the school setting was doing something outside school in a pizzeria, but this was a very strange pizzeria. Like here, we have this pizzeria, which is like you use the word pizzeria as if it was a real pizzeria, but it's a strange pizzeria because you pay with Zs, for instance, and you don't have Zs, and you know the diameters of the pizzas, which you usually do not know, and you calculate best value for money, and you usually do not do that. So it's a fictional event, this best buy solution, and everybody knows that. But still, this is what fills the school activity with meaning. And this fiction, what I call fiction, plays a very central role in my argument. Because here, in this fiction, entities and activities intermingle. Like they have their home in different spheres of culture, you could say. Like mathematics, circle, radius, area, formula, calculation. This is part of the problem. Money, pizza, buying, choosing. Like choosing pizza, that is something that you do in a pizzeria, but you do it on other grounds. But here you do it in connection with mathematics. And then you have these words like that sort of have their home in school, knowledge, understanding, reasoning, etc. And they are brought together, really brought in together in this fiction. And this is what connects, I will say. the particular activity of the mathematics education classroom with the outside world.
Kind of a borderline syndrome of mathematical education.
Yeah, it's a borderline. How did you say it?
Like borderline syndrome.
Oh well, I'm not sure that you could say it like it's a syndrome. Like it plays a very important role, this fiction, and it's important to note, and I will come back to that no one actually thinks that there exists a pizzeria where you pay in Zeds. But that doesn't matter, because the meaning of this event is still there. It's meaningful. Like in the same way as a fictional book about the fantasy world is meaningful. No one thinks that it exists, this book, the world in this book, but it's still meaningful. And no one thinks that this is an actual pizzeria, and these are actual people doing this best by calculation, but it still is meaningful. And this is kind of the status that meaning has in education. And in this fiction, all these things are brought together, and you could say that they kind of bring unity to the modern culture, and that is a function that education fills. It constitutes a fictional world where things fit together. Science fits with education, and it fits with all these different types of activities that culture is filled with. So the fiction functions as a bridge, and here I have one of very few references in this presentation because I think it's necessary. So Paul Dowling has written about this in this very good book, and more recently has written this text, and I think I can click here to get it, and then you see you have the address, and I will put the presentation on internet as well, so you can well, I'm not on the internet, so that's why it doesn't work. Now it works. So this is a more recent text by Dowling that you can check out if you want to. Okay, so finally we have life outside school as it is actually lived. So it gets a little bit complicated, but not too complicated, I hope. So we have what happens in school. We have this fiction that does not exist. And then we have life outside school. And now it's difficult to realize that there is no kind of right way to see life outside school. You can only talk about anything as something. You always have a certain perspective. But you could still say that life outside school is not puzzle solving. One rarely encounters puzzles, and there are like sociologists, anthropologists, and educational theorists that have kind of explored the practical reality of life outside school, and they kind of conclude that it is kind of dissimilar to the life of this fiction, because you do things in particular settings, you do things together with others, like it's social, you use tools, and it's kind of has its materiality, you could say. So there are lots of things that make it quite different from the fiction of education. So without the fictions of schooling, it's not clear how, like buying a pizza, for instance, is related to mathematics, and how it's related to what is called knowledge and competence in school. But for us, when we think of buying a pizza, we can very well think that they are related. But when we think that, I would say that we are affected by the experience of the fiction of education. So when we say that, well, you use mathematics when you buy pizza, then we are under the influence of mathematics education. And that is that can of course be contested, but that is what I claim here. Because without this experience of mathematics education, where these things are brought together, it's not so clear how what happens in the mathematics education classroom is related to the activity of buying the pizza that you want. I hope the idea is clear. So we have 3 levels here. Just try to clarify this. We have this fictional world, which no one believes in. Then we have school side of this fiction, which is different. Like everybody knows that you are not in this world. Like we are not crazy and imagine like if we were on drugs or something, we could like dream this. We know that we sit in school, but we relate to this fictional world, and then you learn. Like this is how learning works. On the other side, we also know that going to a real pizzeria is not the same as going to this fictional pizzeria, but here we use knowledge. And this kind of three-part relational structure is necessary for like learning to take place. That is how learning works according to the sort of explanatory framework of modernity. Look. So, for instance, if you are in school and you solve a puzzle, you're supposed to solve puzzles, but they don't relate to a fiction, then that does not generate knowledge. Like if it's 5 in a row or if it's Sudoku or something like that, it's just then you would say from the perspective of modernity, this is just puzzle solving, it's pointless. You get a skill that is not related to the outside world. You're just playing. Exactly. You can have puzzles with a fiction that does not correspond to real life. Like, let's say you were role playing or you were playing some children's game with a fiction. Then you relate to a fiction and you can learn to do that. But then you would say that this is irrelevant. It is not connected. It's not realistic. You could learn work-related procedures without the fiction, like connect exactly to what happens in an actual pizzeria. But then it would not be mathematics, it would not be knowledge. This would be called vocational training, for instance. You learn what to do at a certain workplace.
Mechanical.
That would be mechanical, exactly, mechanical, practical, mechanical, specific, technical, everything.
Yeah.
Like it's not knowledge. So what you relate to must be different from actual workplace activities. And if you are outside school, like if you are on this other side and you are at work, well, then you do not get knowledge either, because you need to be in the school setting for learning to take place. So the point here, and this is an important point, is that this idea of learning, like the concept of learning, is related to this fiction that has this particular status of being different, both from school and from reality outside school. It needs to be perceived as different, but related. So we need this kind of double relationship. And this fiction is enacted. And here we have this theoretical framework of Roy Rappaport, that like what happens in school is an enactment of activity in a world that needs to be recognized as non-existent, as different from what takes place outside school.
What is the difference between enacted and acted out?
Acted out, yeah, it's acted out. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's acted out. Like I think that Roy Rappaport talks about enactment of meaning, and it's kind of, you can talk about performance as well.
But Fowler makes a distinction.
No, I don't. Let's just see like this. I hope just that the point comes through here. Okay. So can we go on? Because it gets more complicated. So this was just one puzzle, and kind of all the components of the some like we have the idea of problem solving, we have this fiction, etc. But what happens in school is that the individual moves along a sequence of puzzles. So we talk now about just one puzzle, but you go through many puzzles in school, and you train. And this is again like a word of me, like as an anthropologist, you would call it learn. In from the perspective of modernity, you would call it learn. Then you have assessment. You're tested to see how good you are on solving these puzzles. Then you train again. then you assess again, then you train again. And all these puzzles, they relate to different things in the modern world. So it could be about being an astronaut, about police work, about gardening, about grocery shopping, about temperatures, about measuring your height, about economics, about cutting a cake when it's fractions, for instance, about cooking, about climate science, about mathematics. Like mathematics is part of the world, so schoolwork can be about mathematics. It's still about something that's different from school because it's about science. Running, it can be about physics, it can be about interest rates, it can be about laundry, it can be about anything. That is the point, and I put kind of lots of pictures here because that is how it is in school. It's lots and lots of puzzles. And as you do this, you're assessed, you're tested. It is tested how good you are at producing this optimal response. You produce one response, it is compared, and your result says how close you are. And I think it's good to have some detail here. What happens is that the results on a sequence of such puzzles, like 10 or something, are abstracted by teachers, sammanfattade, into a result on a higher level. So this result is just the result on the, like, it's kind of measurement of one event, like that takes maybe 30 seconds or 5 minutes. This result represents the activity of solving like 10 puzzles, and this represents what has happened under this process of training. And then as you take several such tests, these results are abstracted again into a result on an even higher level. So this happens, and just to point out, like this sequence of increasingly difficult puzzles is an elaborate construction convention, okay, of course. And it's difficult to create these sequences. So if you look at it historically, there's been lots of discussion going on how to create a good progression that keeps students interested in solving these puzzles.
What is a meta result?
Sorry?
Meta result. What is it?
I call it just a meta result because it's on a higher level. It's a collection of results. So you can raise in abstraction. And the point is that like a grade.
Is it grades?
This on some level here it's grades or exams, but they are kind of abstractions from results on individual puzzles in several steps. So it's a process of successive abstraction. That is again not really made explicit or reflected upon that this actually happens, but the point is that this is you call it like an administrative system, a machinery that makes the grade represent the activity of the pupil on all these puzzles, and that this is like a formal procedure that is followed
kind
here.
Of accumulations of abstractions.
An accumulation of, that is a very good way to put it, an accumulation of abstraction. So it's kind of very, very thick with meaning, this single number, like it says 120 out of 320 or something like that. It could say after 9 years. But that fraction represents the activity of this single pupil, this person, under like a decade. It's all now kind of contained in this number. So lots of work has been put into this number. And here I just point out that it's an interesting fact with education that the results that you get, they have no effects. You create a response, you get a result, but then you always move on to the next puzzle. And this makes this activity of education quite different from the activity of everyday life or work, because then it matters if you if you do it good or bad. It doesn't matter in school. It matters afterwards, like retroactively. You get very clear information on if you did it good or bad. But in school, you need to sort of have faith in the importance of what you do, because you don't get punished, like or you don't get rewarded. It's all, you could say, symbolic. Like you get information about if you're good or bad, but you need to kind of care. And this is important, I think, for the constitution of this mathematical knowledge or knowledge, because it's something that you need to sort of believe in. And yeah, do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, you have to hope.
You have to hope, and in the end,
that will be rewarding.
That it will be rewarding in the end, exactly.
And you will go to heaven.
Yeah, you will, but then you will go to medical school or whatever.
Yeah,
but then those who actually trusted schooling on the way here, and that because these puzzles are silly and they are not realistic and it's a fiction, but those who kind of trusted in the importance of this fiction are rewarded, because that is how the education system works. It rewards putting an effort into becoming good at solving these puzzles. And of course, like this is a class question, like certain children are more, and it comes easier for those who have parents who kind of say that this is important, and trusts and things like that.
Believes.
Who also believes, exactly. So, coming back to this fiction. So if we have one puzzle, it kind of represents, like this pizza problem, for instance, it represents a pizza in a kind of distorted way, as if buying a pizza was related to mathematics. So one should note how mathematics education textbooks constitute sort of highly formalized representations of the modern world and of mathematics. And this is like, I think about ritual theory here, that this is like strange representations of the world that are used as artifacts in this particular setting of mathematics education. And as a genre, it took form in the 18th century. And this is interesting. I will not go into this, but just to bring out how odd this representation of the world is. Like that the world, like it's not a story about the world. It's broken up into like thousands of small parts, each constituting a puzzle with a correct solution. And this representation of the world that is kind of contained in this book is as the form of a sequence that people work with in the classroom, and it kind of functions only in the mathematics education classroom. It's not a book that you can sit and read anywhere. It is used for in a classroom with a teacher, with pupils, with tests and things like that. And just historical point here is that the number of puzzles that one normal, non-elite, so to speak, individual meets in his life grew exponentially in the 19th century. In the beginning being counted in tens, and then being counted in tens of thousands. So this is just to bring out the specificity of this. So I have some examples of textbooks. So this it's not really important here. It's just to get a feel for this sequence. 679, 680, 600, and you can just imagine going from one to the next, and this is in Swedish, but they are about different things, and that is how mathematics education works. 1929, this is just mostly just computations, but then there are some like word problems here. 1958, well, we have some pictures, but still it's the same, like they're numbered. This is the same genre. 78, this is just mathematics. 84, like it's another layout on the page, but it's still the same. 2006, anyone who thought that this would have sort of changed should note that this is very similar to the book from the 19th century. It belongs to the same genre. So, now we come to the messages. So this is again, I follow Rappaport's kind of way of presenting it with the form, like with practice, what is done, and then what is the message of this, what is enacted. Well, I have lots of messages here, and they are small. The type is small, but they are very important for my argument. So, like the first message, and this is sort of in parentheses because it's of a different kind. It's just that this presence of the sequence in the life of the student makes mathematics education an inevitable part of life that you take for granted because mathematics education is there. So you work with mathematical puzzles. That is what you do. You've done that all your life, and it's obvious, and it seems like inevitable. And this is what rituals do. They present conventions as if they were part of nature, that it could not have been otherwise. So that is a message of this sequence. But then, the infinite variability of reference in combination with the complete invariance of practice and setting, like the reference, what the problems are about, shift, but you sit and work on them in the same way. The message of that, I would say, is that one single toolbox can solve all problems in the world. And the question is, can you manage this toolbox? The inconsequentiality of results says that what you do here is not going to change anything, do anything. You change yourself, you learn. So this is a clear message of this inconsequentiality. The form of achievements here is production of like marks or signs. And it says that producing these signs sort of corresponds to actually having solved these real problems. It's a part of the fiction. So this is what is enacted. Like you do problem solving there, as if you could solve problems outside in the classroom. So this creates this correspondence between the activity in the classroom and activities outside. It's really difficult to understand. How can you believe in this? Like, what have you done? You have produced a number like 5, and then you have sort of like solved the problem.
You kind of make a transfer.
A transfer, like in the imagination.
The experience in that you are solving problems kind of transfers onto the world.
Yeah,
something like that.
Like it's if you were a spirit. And that you could like fly out in the space and be an astronaut, and they have some problem with the cables, and you solve it because
like
you have produced.
You're Superman.
Yeah, you believe that you are like a super mind, you could say, that they could just fly around.
That's kind of similar because you could make a good decision in the pizzeria of real life. You could make a decision just as well or bad as if you went to outer space and were an astronaut.
Yeah.
You could do
both
just as good or bad with the knowledge that you gained in school.
Yeah,
it makes you just as
competent for all these different settings.
But you believe that it works in the pizzeria, but you wouldn't really believe that it would work in outer space.
You wouldn't? Like that?
I don't know.
I think that the point of mathematics education is that mathematics works everywhere. Like this toolbox, if you master it, then you had all this sequence here. Like it's applicable everywhere.
Ideally, what is it? It would work in outer space.
It would.
No one wants to take
Of
a
course,
risk.
mathematics is in space. Why would not mathematics be in space? Of course it's in space. It's on the earth, it's in space, it's in society, it's in nature, it's in physics, it's in chemistry, it's in sports, it's everywhere. And then, like, why is this toolbox so universally applicable? It's because mathematics is everywhere. And this would, with Roy Rappaport, you could call this a canonical message of mathematics education. That what brings all these settings and activities together is mathematics. This is why you need mathematical knowledge to solve them. And then there's two parts there. It's mathematics and it's knowledge. So here, the world is presented as always kind of things happen in the world, but to be able to do these things that happen, you need to have something in you that makes you able to do it. And it functions sort of as an internal personal key to the whole that is outside. And if you lack it, then you cannot perform being modern, being astronaut, being grocery shopper, being whatever it is that you're supposed to be able to be in modernity. So it's a kind of correspondence between human and world that is set up in mathematics education activity, and you are kind of tested. Do you have what it takes? Do you fit into the world? Is this kind of, can you be part of it, be integrated in the world? And you're tested. And it's supposed that this ability will grow within you, and that is knowledge. Something will grow that corresponds to this world filled with mathematics. So you have mathematics in two ways here. That's the important part.
It's out.
It's a superpower. Of course, it's a superpower. That's how it's supposed to be. This is what is enacted. You enact mathematical knowledge as a superpower in the mathematics education classroom. So mathematics exists in two ways. It exists as outside, as in the problems, and in the way that things should work, and as knowledge, as something that is inside you. So the self-referential message of this activity says, how much do you have of this? When you succeed, the message is you have it. When you fail, you do not have it. So this is a framework for interpreting what happens on all these thousands of puzzles. So this is really, you get the message, you could say, when you are in school and do this all the days. So as the puzzles become more and more difficult, you kind learn, and you can become better and better on solving the puzzles. So it is a growth in knowledge. And again, what I've said before, that the same practice has different meanings. That is kind of what creates the magic around mathematical knowledge. That the same activity of solving puzzles can be interpreted as learning. It is interpreted as knowledge use, and it can be therefore used for assessment. And you do the same thing. Then, what is not really recognized is that this setting here is different from this setting here. But the idea of knowledge and knowledge use and mathematics, it all belongs in this fiction. And there you do the same thing. Because here learning and using knowledge is the same. And that is why it works to think about assessment as relevant. Of course it's relevant because it's the same activity. Sorry?
But isn't it relevant because you're actually using it in the setting, in the fictional setting?
Yeah, it all happens in this fictional setting, and then
it kind of confirms itself.
Yeah, it confirms itself.
Yeah.
But this is why it's called self-referential message. That is why, because it's about itself. The measurements are about itself, but because of this fiction, where the school setting is kind of intermixed with everything in the outside world, the impression is created that these measurements are relevant. And the fascinating thing is that the fiction is not believed in. The actual problems, no one thinks that a pizzeria exists where you pay in Zs. And this is true generally for the problems in mathematics education, but still
But you do believe you're learning.
You do believe that you're learning, you do believe that you get knowledge, and you do believe that you use knowledge outside school and things like that. And that is what is fascinating. That is what needs to be understood, how that actually works. Shall we stop or shall we continue?
I need to go to the toilet.
Yeah. You need to go to the bathroom. That's good. Let's take a break and we will continue. Okay, let's start here.
Yeah.
I think they magically disappeared. It looks strange, but this is as it should be.
As a leaf. A leaf.
What?
A leaf.
Yeah, we see the leaf, the
Yeah.
background leaf. It's
Yeah.
perfect. It's very harmonious.
Sure looks like mathematics education in society.
It is like mathematics education in society. It is like a leaf. Okay, so this is the last part of the last part. So I've talked about, or we discussed, this individual doing one thing, doing lots of things, going through this sequence of tasks, and now we come to mathematics education as part of society, as something that is done collectively. And my analysis of this has 3 parts. Again, the number 3 is good. So on the first level, we have a partially non-recognized machinery of standardization, logistics, calculation, disciplined action, automated segregation of people, etc. So this is a level that kind of corresponds to the ritual form. This is the level of the ritual form. Then we have a level of a partially non-recognized message from ourselves to ourselves, like on Christmas, about what we are doing. And then finally, we have the anthropological kind of analysis of this message. So this on this first level, I haven't written so much. This is like, first we have the fabrication of this invariant and stable activity. And what has to be understood is that lots and lots of effort needs to be constantly put into the education system and mathematics education to make it kind of exist, like to make all these classrooms and make people come to them, and make teachers do pretty much the same thing in the same kinds of settings. All these sequences of puzzles needs to be constructed and distributed and worked on. So this is not something that happens by itself. So this is one first level, like it is a kind of fabricated experience that is invariant, geographical invariant and stable, that fits with the ritual form in that way. Then the second step is the fabrication of standardized measures of performance. And historically, like this, well, they emerged at the same time, but this is something else. Like this is something that belongs to the 20th century, this standardization of measurements with statistics. And it's a very non-trivial task to create these measures that are comparable. And then as the third step, we have these systematic effects of measurements. So I hope it's clear why I call this a sort of a machinery, because it's sort of mechanical. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks or feels.
No, in that way it's mechanical, but it's not mechanical in the way that it exists in and by itself. It's a lot of...
No, it exists through collective work, but it's built into laws and regulations and stuff like artifacts that kind of contribute to making this into what it is. So it's kind of highly regulated action that is guided by
procedures?
Yeah, procedures and things, laws, regulations, but also how the classroom looks, things like that. So that is one level. On a second level, like this, in the same way as we don't talk about classroom activity as puzzle solving, we don't talk about the education system in terms of all these mechanisms that bring it into existence, that sustains it. We talk about it as an attempt to teach people what they need to know. So that is how we understand the education system. So one could say that we adapt ourselves to the properties of the world. Everybody needs knowledge. We try to bring everybody knowledge through education. We put a lot of effort into preparing everybody for the hard struggle of life in a world filled with mathematical problems. So that is what politicians and educators can say, that people need mathematical knowledge for their everyday life, for their professional life. We need more engineers, we need more scientists, and the only way to get proper mathematical knowledge is to start very early, like when you're 6 or 7, and go through this long process of education. And we see that pupils are bored and they have anxiety and things like that, but we see that as a necessary evil because everybody needs knowledge, and this is our attempt to bring them what they need. Okay? And of course, these measurements, we try to measure as accurately as possible the ability each and everybody has to master the complex task of living. So it makes perfect sense in this level, and this is again like the level of the fiction that we enact. It makes perfect sense to call that mathematical knowledge. And then we distribute people to tasks appropriate for their ability. So on this level of self-reflective understanding, the administrative system follows how the world is by itself. So this, just to make that clear, this level corresponds to how natives see it, and it is important, I think, to recognize that I say that it's partial and non-recognized, because this is not made explicit. It's usually not made explicit that this is how we look at mathematics education. It never needs to become explicit, but this is sort of the meaning that we are enacting. And this is on the third level, just to talk about it, to make that explicit. From the anthropological perspective, one could say that mathematics education is a collective enactment of life in a world imbued with mathematics, where what you basically do when you live is to solve a series of problems. We enact a vision of life as problem solving, and we thus make this vision real. So the experience of this world in school is thoroughly fabricated, but it is as if we had not fabricated it. And Bruno Latour has written something similar about science, how we make science, but it is as if it was like in nature by itself, things kind of constructed by science. And I think this is something similar going on here, that we misunderstand what mathematics education is, because we don't really recognize how much we make it ourselves. And this then is kind of typical for how rituals work, because they are interpreted as sort of following the entities and substances present in the world, even though it is the ritual that kind of brings them into existence. And I think it's interesting to note also kind of the not so hidden message of mathematics education, that life is a struggle, and that you need to face that struggle individually, and that you only have, like in principle, one tool or weapon, and that is your mind. And that is what you need to form You said something last time we did this recording and
when
didn't
you
turn
didn't
on.
plug
I
in
didn't
this.
plug in the microphone.
Yeah.
You said that.
This is where the stream of messages is created. This is the work that goes into it.
Yeah, but you said about also the kind of the changing world, that
Yeah, the
everything
changing
material
world,
kind of changes and shifts, like technologies and artifacts and things like that. They change, but what remains stable, according to mathematics education, according to this message, is that mathematics it will always be there, and mathematical knowledge will always be useful. So therefore, it makes sense to kind of not bring in technology and artifacts in education as tools that you use. You train your mind, you train your thinking, you train your kind of inner competence. But it's also a depressing vision of life, that it's really, really hard, that you cannot just relax and have fun, because then you will fail. And this vision is made real because you fail in school. But we kind of see it as if life was like that, but maybe it wouldn't have to be like that if there were no schools.
This is sort of a way of making Darwinism real.
Yeah, exactly. It's a kind of enactment of Darwinism.
Yeah,
we have
do.
created a Darwinian world where individuals struggle for survival in school.
Yeah, and it could be differently.
And it could be.
Made it true.
We have made it true, and we have also made it inevitable on the individual level. It is inevitable, and that is how rituals work. You need to participate. You need to accept this, because otherwise you will get problems as part of culture. But collectively, like this is the point here, is that this could be otherwise, because nature as in itself is not like this. And that is what I'm trying to make clear here in this presentation. So the machinery of measurements brings the entity of mathematical knowledge into existence and makes it material, visible, distinct. So this is very much closely connected to Rappaport's theory, because this is how he talks about the self-referential message. That is that these vague indicators of status in culture are made material and distinct and often quantitative. So I've made a drawing here how this works. So here we have Lisa. For some decades, Lisa has trained on puzzle solving and participated in a row of formalized supervised assessments, producing a series of sets of marks, as one pupil among thousands of others. An interpretation of Lisa's responses by means of centrally established stable and geographically invariant rules leads to the conclusion that they correspond to an A+. Well done, Lisa. Excellent. The grade indicates that Lisa has knowledge. This knowledge functions as a tool for thinking and action, putting her in contact with entities, structures, and laws of the natural and social world. So here we have an atom that exists in the world, and we have division that Lisa knows about. And you need to know about atoms and division to understand the mass of the world. Like this is part of the message. And Lisa then also, of course, have this grade. And the magic of the ritual lies in the fact that she gets two things. One that is visible and one that is invisible. And the visible sign indicates that she has this invisible thing. And the invisible thing is the important one. But this is the one that you always has to kind of operate with in practice.
Indicators are extremely important.
Yeah, so the indicator is very, very important. So, just to connect this third level to the first one here, knowledge can seem to be an invisible substance that can inhere in people because of the precision, reliability, stability, and invariance of the processes by which its existence is acknowledged. And this can be compared with other such kind of entities or substances that people can have. I've written here like IQ, income, nationality, but I think that like you can see knowledge as a kind of diagnosis. Like ADHD is much discussed now, and that is something that that it is claimed that people can have. But it's actually just a description of a collection of symptoms, and for this to make sense as something that is the same everywhere and that people can have, you need to have kind of stable procedures to establish its existence, because it doesn't kind of it's not very trustworthy if someone has ADHD in Gothenburg and then suddenly does not have it, if she travels to Stockholm and then she has it again when she moves to Umeå. So the existence and trustworthiness of the invisible, whatever it is, kind of depends on the reliability and of the measurements. And lots of efforts are put into making mathematical knowledge and knowledge in general into such a trustworthy and standardized entity. So here knowledge is simultaneously brought into existence in two complementary ways: canonically as a form that can exist, and self-referentially as a particular quantity for Lisa. So these two kind of support each other, these two aspects of mathematical knowledge. That it is something that someone can have is kind of supported by the fact that people actually have more or less of it. So this indication here have lots of different consequences. It plays a very central role in mathematics education.
Also, the effects is relying on the indicator, not the actual substance that we are talking about.
Yeah, so when we come to this last step, like the machinery giving grades real and life determining effects, makes its reference knowledge into a real occult force. I use this word, occult force, Rappaport's anthropological term. So what has effects, for sure, are grades, indicators, but we interpret it as effects of the substance. Yeah, superpower.
Effect of the superpower.
Yeah, so it's kind of like just because knowledge is so important, because it is so useful, we have kind of given these indicators effects in our administrative systems. And I can go back here to what I said in the first part of this presentation. I talked here about the dynamics. It is supposed that sign use, that's what I call it here, sign use of knowledge, that use of grades indicating knowledge, is parasitic upon its substance use, but it is rather the other way around. So it is use of grades that is primary, and it is kind of this idea of the substance having effects that is secondary. So this is the point here. Okay. Any comment?